All right, so we got another one today, and it's another one of those ones where I go back in time to like the actual story, to like Enies lobby period in time. Now it's a Luffy versus Kaku, Jabra, and Blueno, all three at once. Not he's fighting one and going to the other one. They're all there at the same time. They basically all three run up on Luffy and they're like, "Hey, Straw Hat, you cannot be here and shit. We'll fuck you up." And they're saying that shit to him and shit. And he's like, "Oh no," they didn't know what he had, right? They didn't know the two things he had on him, right? I know he has devil fruit powers, and they have their six powers, and their devil fruits too. But hey, man, uh, not what you think, brother. That's a pre-time skill Luffy, but pre-time skill Luffy at what gear third and gear second gear. They have the six powers in their devil fruits. So we're gonna get into this, all right? Now, when it comes to strength, Luffy hasn't beaten strength. You know, we already saw Luffy throw Blueno around like a rag doll in base form. He wasn't even in gear second. He was grabbing his head and throwing him against the, pillars and shit. Like, yo, I'll fuck you up right now. You guys gotta give me back my shit. You know? Speed goes to Luffy. His second gear can keep up with the shave technique. If not, he's a little bit faster. And I do get the extra second gear, man. But when you're looking at the three guys, we already know he's faster than Blueno. He had him fucked up. Like once he went second gear, Blueno wasn't safe. Like he wasn't safe anymore. Like no, you saw that shit in the anime if he made it that far. Buddy was like not standing a chance. We got Jabra and Kaku. They were not moving that fast. Zoro was able to react to Kaku's speed. Durability wise, I'm giving it to those guys because they do have iron body. They actually can damage Luffy. He don't have arm in hockey. If they hit him, they're gonna, cut through him. They're gonna cut him. They will cut him, and they will, stab him too. They will, bury their, claws in him, like Lucci did, right? They will be damaging Luffy, right? But they have, iron body. I'll give them the edge there. And I ain't saying that, I ain't saying what you might think I'm saying. But when it comes to durability, I have to give it to those guys. Endurance-wise, Luffy by far. Luffy was in a longer fight than any of those two were. And then when he fought Lucci, shit. So he ain't gonna do that in this scenario, but he's basically got that potential to do that if he has to. If he has to take a long fight with these guys, yeah, he can. And get intelligence-wise, I'm giving it to the group of three. They're not super smart, but they're smarter than Luffy. Luffy ain't the brightest guy in the world. People who watch One Piece know. And I don't hate Luffy for being not that bright, because he still gets results. He takes action, right? He has a way of making shit work still, right? Because he listens to people who are smarter than him and takes their advice. People who are wiser than him and takes their advice and he learns. But these guys are actually smarter than him. Then we got experience also. They're all more experienced than him. They're all like in their 30s, 40s. I think Kaku's like 20 something. But these guys are all older than Luffy. They've been doing that shit. They've been brought up in that shit since they were kids, just like Lucci was. They just ain't as powerful as he is. Close skills go to Luffy. Luffy has close skills on these guys. These guys got close skills too. They got finger pistol and all that, right? But Luffy's gonna run up on him. And, he's like he's already done it to Blueno, man. So like I know he'll do it to the other guys too. And give him the what for the hands. Now range skills wise, I'm giving it to Luffy again. He can stretch his arms out and You know, he can get you from like you'll be over there and he'll still hit you, right? Because if he uses gear third, he can make his hand even bigger, so it's not like a fist is a smaller size coming at you from a distance. You can see it, dodge it. You can't dodge that. Boom, you get hit by it, and that will come out during this fight. Recovery goes to Luffy. God damn it, Luffy. It goes to Luffy. Hacks going to Luffy. Second gear and third gear. You know, that shit's better than anything they got. You know, Kaku has his 4-sword style and his 6 powers. They all have the 6 powers, and their dope fruits. Luffy's dope fruit is stronger than theirs, and it's like that. And we've seen in the regular timeline or how it's portrayed in the anime and the manga that Luffy had a close, like that was just like I think that was his closest fight. Like like he wasn't the one who was like he wasn't like fighting an enemy that was way more powerful than him, and he had to grow during the fight too much. His opponent was more experienced than him, but they were still like on the same level. That was his first fight that was actually like that and shit. It could have went either way. You know, these guys ain't Lucci though, bro. They ain't doing that. They ain't pushing him like that. They'll try though. Um, environment goes to those three though, because they know about Enies lobby. They work. It has their flag. They've been there before, and it's their business. But when it comes down to it, Luffy's winning that shit. Luffy's winning that shit mid difficulty. Because like we know that once Luffy went into gear second, right, he already had Blueno sweating, right. He had he couldn't even react to it. He was like, where? Boom, boom, he's getting hit. He can't even see Luffy. Jabra's stronger than Blueno. Jabra, the only attacks that are going to really do damage to Luffy is his finger pistol and Tempest kick, which Luffy can dodge those Tempest kicks, and he can even dodge his finger pistols. But if they try to like plan a coordinated attack where one of them's attacking him and then the other one sneaks up behind, he will get penetrated by the claws and shit, and that will do damage to Luffy. I do see that, but other than that, they don't have any like big moves like 16 gun or anything like that. They don't got all that. Wolf Boy's going down, and then Kaku, he has 4-sword style. Now that shit's dangerous for Luffy because he don't have armor now, he don't have iron body, but he is faster, so he can dodge that shit. But it will be, harder at the beginning of the fight as far as like dodging that shit because he has to dodge 3 people. Because like in theory, I guess Blueno could, dip into his, dimension, but Luffy, I don't see Luffy having a problem with that because like as soon as he opens the door, Luffy's gonna fuck his ass up, and he's just gonna be out of it. Like he's almost like a non-factor almost. This fight's mid-diff, for sure. Luffy's beating all 3 of them mid-diff. And Kaku's like carrying that fight, I think. With his 4-sword style. He'll probably have to use 3rd gear on him, for sure. But that's what I think about this fight, y'all, and let me know what you think in the comments below.